So I'm going to start out with my first leading question, and then we'll look for questions from the field. We have a microphone that will assist us. So I listened, I must say I listened to all the presentations beforehand, but every time you hear a presentation, you hear something different and interesting. And the first question actually is to Emilio from DAK. I found it rather interesting as fundamentally a process control guide. Emilio, what department do you work for?
IT.
You're an IT guy.
Yeah.
And you were the project manager for a migration project.
Yes, I was. That's interesting. And I think the reason is that people who choose me for leading this project had a perspective, a different perspective, like having someone from the outside world. By the way, we had 8 previous attempts to justify this project. Those 8 failed. And by the time they invited me to this project, I think being an outsider, I saw something from a different perspective, and I'm proud to say that I convinced whoever I had to convince for the capital investment.
So the question, follow-on question then is, give me an example of people you had to convince on the 9th try.
Yeah, I told you that I went up to the CEO, DAX CEO, and beyond, and that's the king. Above the CEO, I went personally to talk to him and show the justification and where we were, and basically what is going to happen if we do nothing. And I went that high to the king.
So the defining moment was what statement? I heard something about force majeure. Was that fundamentally the message?
That was basically the sentence that convinced everyone: force majeure and production losses and sales losses. That was the defining moment on convincing management.
So it really had nothing to do, the defining moment had nothing to do with aging hardware. It fundamentally had to do with business loss that accelerated the migration.
Business loss. At that level, management people, it's not that they don't care, but they might not know about technical details and hardware versions, software versions. They care more about businesses, business data, business losses, sales, production loss. That was the defining moment when I mentioned those figures to the top management.
Very good. Well, I congratulate you on your successful authorization and complete. And by the way, is the project complete?
It's complete, by the way. Yeah, it's complete. It's running. It's considered a successful migration all over DAC, and we are very proud.
Very good. Very successful from a business as well as a technical perspective.
Yep. Thank you.
Questions in the audience? Have we anyone in the back? Great. Start there.
Testing.
In light of the timelines that for both of the migrations of the 2 projects we heard from Tarasenko and Dow, how does that marry in with the talks we heard this morning about how we have to speed up our transitions and times of changing our software out, not from 20 years or 10 years, but to 5 years and less, when your program's not going to be even done until 2020. How do you marry those 2 together? I mean, I look at it from the standpoint, if I try and get our software and hardware changed out, and I come in and tell my CEO that I need to do it in another 5 years when the project's still in place, he's going to laugh me out of the room.
I'd like to address that question to Dave, because you use the term forced march.
Right.
Okay, and because you're describing a forced march would be what Andy challenged us today. So given what you understand of a forced march, and I understand you might have a longer runway, but what was the direction from an equity owner? I mean,
Well,
somebody
we-
who's going to flip the company, essentially. So what's your forced march?
I'm not sure how we could do it any faster, actually, because we don't have enough project managers, we don't have enough people, we don't have enough knowledgeable people, we don't have enough process technology experts to get it done like in 2 years. Or, these are difficult projects. And for us, this is not loop control. I can't emphasize enough how important it is to understand the models that we're running under. These models are highly technical, S88, S102, to do it safely with no process safety incidents. It just goes on and on. It's truly brain surgery. And so we did a lot of feed studies. We did several feed studies for the batch and then also for continuous. And we did a lot of work up front globally with ABB. And it's taken some time, and we're going faster and faster. And like I said, by the end of the program, in the peak, we're doing 7 plants a year. I don't know how to go any faster, so I'm just like, I don't know how to go any faster. And certainly management wants you to go slower because it's money, right? It's capital, so.
Well, there's a cash flow limitation, right? But if cash flow is not a limitation, I think the answer he was giving is he is labor limited. Is that what you said?
Yeah, and I think the tools that we've developed and the standards, the methods, the work process, the tools are scalable. And ABB is already partnering with us to provide additional engineering for the new plants that are spooling up. Because think about it, by the time you've got 6 or 7 plants underway per year, you've now leaving a trail of 6 or 7 plants per year you've got to maintain. And it's totally new culture, totally new links to SAP, totally new IT stuff, everything's new. So you got to absorb all that, and it is a lot of change. I think we're doing a great job. I think we have a great partner, and we're going as fast and hard and smart as we can. But again, you've got to have good work process.
So I heard work process and standardization of your solutions with good testing allows you to scale by
And tools, right, tools.
By outsourcing and breaking that limitation.
Right.
So we have a labor limitation. And I think that the answer to Andy's question would, how do we scale with scarce resources?
Yeah.
Question.
This question is for Charla.
Charla?
I'm trying to look at your slides. You had the Automation Health Index. Two-part question. I would like to know a little bit more about your Automation Health Index, how you created that and what you used. And also, did you get any pushback on your Automation Value Index of how you built the different parts, those 10 things, like any pushback on saying, okay, this is our value for industry standards?
Yeah, so first one on the health index. Your question was, what more detail about that one?
Yes.
So we actually received some good information from a partner across the street, and we got some good start from Dow on some of the information that they had done with their assessment tools. So we were able to look at some of that information, partner with them, and really adopt a lot of that. It was really straightforward. It's the components of the system, and you basically look at them and from their life cycle perspective, and you have to get information from the vendor, on whether the systems are currently supported, and internally as well, whether you're capable of supporting them. And that was a pretty straightforward metric, a way to deploy that out there with the health index. The value index is another story, like you said. It's and we're still rolling that out. But it took us probably a year to get the criteria for each of those 10 categories and the scoring on that. So we're still rolling that out, but the scores are really actually probably 60 to 70 is going to be a pretty high score in that regard. So it's not that you're shooting for 100, but it's trying to measure where you are and having a comparable number that you can compare process to process and understand where there is potential to improve that score. Does that answer your question?
Maybe just a little follow-up on that. Charlotte did mention that with the assistance of Siemens, they worked with the University of Maryland, CALCE, C-A-L-C-E. Just a credit here. CALCE is has an organization that's focused on electronic systems reliability. And fundamentally, one of the professors there, Peter Sanborn, has a publication on electronic systems lifecycle management. And what Dow Corning did was marry the University of Maryland reliability analysis with, as I mentioned before, Peter Martin's lifecycle six-box model, and marry those two together to fundamentally analyze the physics of failure of control systems and put that into the model to determine when these failure events would occur. Okay, and that now determines when you should, what is the risk level at which you're going to have a business interruption caused by a control system. What Dow Corning did, and it is part of the value assessment, is there are more than just electronic system events. There are process events, there are human events, there are environmental events. And what they did with that CALCE model is they went back to their history logs, their OSI-PI history logs, and the OEE data, which is part of their ERP system, SAP, and they amalgamated that annual data and built a stochastic failure model around all events, not just electronic system events. Based on the probability of failure of those events and the ability to mitigate, you saw a graph of red and blue charts. The ones that they could correct, they then put back into the model to fundamentally say, if we improve the level of automation, we can mitigate these events. Now, when you go to the business, you're showing them their data. This OEE data is their data. The automation guys didn't make this up. It is their data, their failure data. So fundamentally, you now come into a contractual situation. They say, this is our data, these are our gaps. You say you can correct these problems by higher levels of automation. We will give you money to fix those problems under the agreement that you solve them and create a sustainable solution. And that becomes the value proposition for migrating a particular system. So very rigorous, very engineering-based, and very financially based. And so the key components, as you mentioned, is the health index of the system that you have, both the hardware and software, and the value proposition of the OEE gaps that exist today in the plant today, and finding that sweet spot. So that's more details of that. Another question from the field. No questions.
I got one.
You can, go ahead.
To that, I mean, one of the things that's hard to take into account is new technology, for example, wireless. How do you calculate the value of wireless in, say, a total life cycle cost analysis, whether it's value or health? You know, I don't know if you've looked at that or if Dow Chemicals looked at that, but that's really the new paradigm, is how do we get wireless incorporated into our control systems? And, you know, but how do you measure the value of that?
Now you're asking a new technology question, so I'm going to turn that question over to both of our technical examiners. I'd like to get a response from all of our technical guys. So, Ronald, why don't you start?
Yeah,
How would you get value through wireless? Is this question.
Is this working?
Give him the middle one.
Thank you. So it of course spans beyond wireless. So if you run controllers faster, so you have faster response times. We have one customer that we upgraded his system that was built in '99. We upgraded that about 6 years ago, and they had process problems because the control system was faster than it was before. So you gain through that more faster network technologies to hook up your I/O or intelligent devices and get more data out of those. So those things all play into that, and particularly the study that Mike referred to does take into account the chance of an old system showing failures that you might suffer longer from versus new systems being either proactively or quicker in response, giving you a quicker response time on that. So that does count into that as well. Now, if you're looking at wireless, you would probably look at the ability to now measure signals that you were never be able to measure before. So put a wireless hard receiver out in the field that collects all this additional data that you otherwise might not get without buying new I/O modules and pulling new wires. So that falls within that same capability if you buy a platform today that can host those kind of technologies.
So, Leo, I would like to ask you the next question, because it follows from Emilio's presentation. He mentioned HMI changes and localization of language, what have you. I think in that particular project, whether it was wireless or otherwise, I think there's a value proposition there. I thought I heard that.
Yes, you did. The previous control system that they were running was in English, and primarily a text-based system with some graphics. The operators only speak Spanish, for the most part. A few of them had some English capability. When we upgraded the system, the HMI is a localized HMI, and they started right off with Spanish. And the graphics were converted over to a Spanish language graphic. And that brought immediate benefits from the operators. Less chance
So
for them
could
to
you
make
see
errors.
the use of wireless HMI as an extension to that solution space?
It is a Windows-based. They can use wireless HMI. They can put the graphics onto handheld devices. They're currently not doing that. There are a lot of things we've heard from over here where they made a lot of advances. You did a lot of new things as part of the upgrade. In order to meet the time frame, DAC chose to basically upgrade the system as it is, which now reduced or eliminated the need to train operators on a new system. And now going forward, as Emilio had mentioned, with loop tuning and other capabilities, more S106 capabilities into their system, that's what they're going to enhance. So they took a different approach. We're going to replace that as it is with a system and capability to add advanced process control and advanced capability over the coming years to make that transition faster and eliminate a lot of training that would have been necessary initially, right, coming out of startup. Different philosophy.
So the follow-on to his question then is, I'm going to put Dave Funderburg from ABB on the spot. He's not going to like me for this, but your boss in a previous session fundamentally made, Peter Terwish made statements about technologies where we have no operators in the control room at all, or offshore platforms or remote pipelines in remote locations. One would think that wireless solutions may be part of that solution. Is that a good assumption? Or?
That's fair. I mean, what we're looking at is not just from the bottom-up approach, where you're looking like for like, you're also looking at putting the infrastructure in to solve your business objectives and your business problems. So sometimes the right technology could be wireless. Sometimes it could be just remote access from remote locations if it's an offshore platform. So I think wireless definitely has its fit. The wireless mesh technology that vendors have provide the reliability that maybe we didn't have 5-10 years ago. So now we're able to get industrial wireless mesh to provide that operator real-time data. So he's not just reading a piece of instruction to do something in the field. He also has some real-time data without having to call back to the control room to say, is it still safe for me to make this manual interaction out in the field? So that's where you see what kind of reliability you need, what business driver is driving that, and that's where it kind of complements the like-for-like plus the potential to do uplift. You have the infrastructure now in place where you can start doing those things. And I think that's what all three customers here have focused on, is getting the infrastructure in where you can build on and really solve the business objectives, which we saw with Dow Corning.
What I'm hearing is that part of migration, Emilio alluded to it, Charlotte gave us some examples of introducing new technology, and Dave has taken it even farther with outside of the traditional control system approach to value propositions, that we need to look at all avenues of using automation to create value for our companies, and it makes it a lot simpler to justify to essentially the CFO of the company. Which leads me to another question then. How does I'm going to ask each of the individuals, how does your company view end of life? I'm curious as to the perceptions. Now, Amelia, you said you had to sell to the CEO. What was the general community? Was the manufacturing plant asking? Who was asking? What was the attitude?
To be honest, the attitude was we were reactive. We had the urgency already over the manufacturing operations, and that put us in a position on a potential force majeure, as I mentioned. We were acting reactively, honestly.
So Dave, in your particular case, you had been sold and you said you were on a forced march, but if I'm the new CEO of Trinseo, I can think of many ways to spend capital as a new company. Where were you on the priority list as a newly formed company? I mean,
fortunately, such a large project to replace all the control systems in the company that we are very high profile. We're, I would say, if not the largest, one or two per year in terms of capital spending for the next few years. So we get a lot of attention, and they expect us to deliver, right? So we have to maintain schedule, and we have to maintain performance.
how do you generate credibility in front of an equity owner? I mean, how does that?
They know. They look at the plants that we've got, and they benchmarked when they bought us compared to the industry. And like I said, we're only 2,100 employees, $5 billion in sales. So they know they've got a really good performing machine, and they want to maintain that. So we have best-in-class asset management type metrics. We do all that. We call it AMR, asset mechanical reliability. We know what our run rates are. We know how fast we can run. We have a lot of data systems in place, legacy, that deliver a lot of value, but they all have to be replaced now. So all the historians, a lot of the MES type applications we're indeed replacing. In some cases, a lot less dollars, license fees, and people to maintain them when we're done. So I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah. Charlotte, your situation, you're not on a forced march. I mean, you as the automation organization actually were trying to be proactive as opposed to reactive. Give us some idea of the pushback in dealing with the various stakeholders to it. You mentioned you have over a half a dozen major control system vendors and various versions of those. You're trying to do the right thing for the corporation, but how are you selling this to the individual plants or businesses? How is this going?
Well, that's why I think these metrics were key, is trying to identify that and be able to communicate back to them. I think historically we were probably in that reactive space, but when you have systems that are at end of life and they need to be replaced, giving them that health index gives them an idea to compare where do we really have risk to the business. The value index gives you an idea of where you can get more out of the system than you're currently getting.
So they're believing the metrics.
They're believing it, yes. And you do projects, but I think you have to be careful too. Is when you do you have to consciously understand the scope of the migration you're taking. If you're adding that extra value, make sure you build into the schedule that you're going to test and migrate that new capability, train the operators, make sure you have the resources from manufacturing that can handle that scope of change. We took a fully manual process to totally automated,
right.
A continuous process that was really 5 continuous processes all in one that you could make different recipes. But you've got to make sure the operations are all on board and understand the scope of change. And we got a lot out of that process, but...
Sounds like you build a lot of credibility, which helps in selling it forward.
Yeah, and so I think you have to consciously decide what level of automation. And so when you guys talked to different, I don't think you were different. You were like for like, but you just have a significantly higher level of automation today than what they had at their site. So when you look at your migration, look at what you currently have and where you want to go, and do that assessment on the process and see, do you have gaps in your performance, and can you get more out of that process by doing automation type activities?
Questions? Go ahead.
During your upgrades, you made significant changes to your control systems and improvements And there was a question a minute ago about control rooms. Did you go through and redesign any of your control rooms? Were there any value adds created by how you installed the new HMIs in the control rooms?
Charlotte, you want to start with that one? Did you change anything in your control rooms? as part-
Actually, no, we really didn't. The graphics changed, so you're going to more of an ASM type look and feel, so you're training operators on that. So the control rooms didn't. The functionality they get, when they can pull up their trends and they can analyze data a lot, they've got new capabilities they didn't have before. But as far as the structure and layout of the control rooms, we didn't.
So Emilio, did you change the control room?
Yeah. Basically, the operator's interface was changed from English to Spanish. That helped a lot to our operators. And also, the operators' consoles were 2 displays in the past. Now we have 4 wide screens, which allow the operators to see more on the process. And something I forgot to mention before, we performed the migration in 7 days. And our vendor was the only one who offered that for us. So the downtime was 7 working days for the entire migration. That plus the new capabilities in the control room were defining for the solution.
We've got time for one more question here, I think. Senator there.
Yeah, do any of the vendors have statistics on what percentage of your installed base or control systems in general, what percentage of your installed base are at the end of life and need to be replaced, say, within the next 5 years?
Go ahead.
You mean the vendors of the existing systems or the vendors of the new system?
So,
Okay.
are you asking me how many of my systems are end of life? So of your installed base, how many of your Siemens systems are at the end of their life? Do you know? What percentage of?
Oh, what
the Siemens-
percentage of your installed base is at end of life?
So if we look at the Siemens installed base, we are looking at the precursor systems before Somatic PCS7, which is more Apex, Teleperm M, which is hardly used in the United States, and Texas Instruments, which is somewhat used. And I would say that, I would have to know from the top of my head how many of those are installed in the marketplace. But TI was discontinued a month ago completely. 10 years ago, we discontinued the sale of that product, and we did 10 years more support. And a lot of those systems are small PLC systems or distributed systems that we, actually I heard about 2 in the last month. But so there's probably hundreds of those out in the marketplace of our platform. Now, ABB is going to give you a more interesting story because they have many more legacy systems in their portfolio. So,
I'll first start with a quote from one of our ABB colleagues on the difference between a good question and a great question. So a great question is one you have the exact answer for. So I'll say that's a very good question. But yeah, so it's very difficult to get into details. But as an automation vendor that has many different control systems in our portfolio, we've done a good job of always focusing on that. So evolution is in our DNA. We've come from history of different control systems. So I would say we don't have any at end of life because we always have a next step for our control system applications. And that was one of the things that helped when we're talking to partners like Trinzio in the development. That was kind of how we were used to working in the automation environment. I've worked on many control systems myself, Bailey controls, and so on. So it kind of is part of our culture as ABB is to not get in a situation where we have significant end of life in our control platforms.
So Leo, the last word. We're getting into the end of our session here.
We don't have any that are at end of life, regardless of what Emilio said earlier. We provided a continuous upgrade path for our customers since the D3 was introduced in 1982. We have customers who have upgraded the controllers, You know, 1 year, a couple years later, they upgrade their I/O, they upgrade their HMIs. We have online upgrade capabilities, so in the last 10 years or so since that was introduced, we have customers staying a lot more current with both software and hardware than they were able to before. We do have some customers who have some old systems, but they are available to upgrade, and we can upgrade their applications. Emilio's applications are upgraded in about 2 days. Convert all his applications from code that was written 20 years ago to the current state of the code. So we've prided ourselves on our ability to keep our customers updated. But not all customers choose to upgrade at that time, so the decision really is up to them.
Okay, we're at our time limit. I see Dick Hill has waved his hand to me. So thank you very much let's give a hand to our presenters and vendors.